It's great to have you all here. We've got a high-powered front table here, and I know there's going to be a lot of great information shared tonight. So welcome everybody, and Mary, I think you are next. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bill. And good evening. I'm Mary Hughes-Smith. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters, Rochester Metro area. The League is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We influence public policy through education and advocacy. We focus significant effort on registering new voters, and if you're not registered to vote or if you moved since the last election, please stop at the table on your way out. We'll be happy to make sure that you're ready for the primaries in April, beginning in April, and also for November. By the way, the League of Women Voters is not limited to women. Men are most welcome to join us in making democracy work.
For how long has that been?
Pardon me?
After how long has men been in the League of Women Voters?
Men have always been welcome.
They've always been welcome.
74, we formally invited men to join.
Wow.
On behalf of all the members of the Rochester League, I'd like to welcome you to our February forum, for which we've invited a stellar panel to help us review 4 pieces of pending legislation in New York State. Carole Camp is a retired nurse and social worker. She's an avid hiker and was trained by Citizens Climate Lobby, which teaches citizens how to lobby for carbon-free and dividend. She'll be discussing A8372, the bill proposing carbon tax in New York State. Melissa Carlson is a member of Mothers Out Front, is self-employed, a do-it-yourselfer stay-at-home mom. She's a city resident and has worked for decades with local farmers and community gardens. Melissa will be discussing A8011, the bill to require divesting the state's public pension funds from fossil fuel companies. Sue Hughes-Smith, a lecturer at the College at Rockport and an adjunct professor at RIT, holds a BA in geology as well as master's degrees in education and environmental conservation. She's affiliated with the Rochester People's Climate Coalition, Mothers Out Front, and Citizens Climate Lobby. She'll be discussing A7497, the bill to require 100% clean energy by 2030. And Barara Grosh has a PhD in economics from the University of California at Berkeley. She taught at the Maxwell School of Citizenship at Syracuse University. She's an active member of the League, of Mothers Out Front, and of the National Council of Jewish Women. She spends much of her time as a community activist working to make Rochester a great place for all of our children and their children to grow up. Barbara will be discussing A7625, the bill relating to financial surety for major facilities, vessels, and railroads, Bakken Oil. Our moderator is Catherine Smith, first vice president of the League and our advocacy director. Catherine is a retired elementary school teacher and is very active in many advocacy activities in the community. Catherine is our in-house expert on all things legislative. We're proud to present this important discussion, and we're especially pleased to offer a question and answer segment following the presentations. Please join me in welcoming Catherine Smith and our panel.
Mary, do you have a preference of the first person?
Not at all. Not at all.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Smith. I'm going to ask Carole if you and your helper would do the PowerPoint first.
Okay, sure.
Her husband, Howard, in case someone doesn't know. Sorry. I'm referring to you as the helper.
Okay, my name is Carole Camp, and I'm a volunteer for Citizens Climate Lobby Proactive Outreach. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters, especially Carole Hoffman and Barara Grosh, for the opportunity to speak with you today. Citizens Climate Lobby shares many of the same goals as the League of Women Voters. It's grassroots, it lobbies, it trains citizens to fulfill their responsibilities. But the difference with Citizens Climate Lobby is that we focus only on one goal, and that is passage of a federal fee and dividend law to stop the accelerating effects of climate change. I'm first going to present the fee and dividend program, and then I'll tie it into how New York State's is the same and different, but they're both fee and dividend laws. Okay, let's see. So, I want to start by saying, I heard about climate change in the late 70s, but the whole thing seemed so depressing that I kept my head buried in the sand. And periodically something would come up and I would join it. A book discussion group, or when the city of Rochester did the reducing your carbon footprint. That was the first group I knew of that offered me solutions. But I found as an individual I could only take those suggestions so far. So when I came across Citizens Climate Lobby, I saw they had a solution and they were training their volunteers to take action that will lead Congress to pass our carbon fee and dividend proposal. Now let's get me used to this then. What have you heard about the effects of global warming? Just shout out a phrase or sentence.
Rising sea level.
Rising sea levels. Melting, melting glaciers and ice weather. Can't hear that last one.
Severe weather,
Severe weather and unpredictable weather.
acidic
Spreading
oceans.
disease.
Spreading disease,
Displaced animals.
displaced animals.
Acidification of oceans.
Right. Okay, so you're well acquainted with the topic. Now, this shows a graph of the Earth's temperature from 1880 to the present. And you see the blue, it was lower, and then when we get up into the red, that's where it's warming. And then the black line is the CO2 concentration. So as the CO2 goes up, the Earth warms. Our future depends on action now. By 2100, if we take no action, the Earth's temperature will rise between 4 and 6 degrees Fahrenheit, which increases the environmental consequences. What is the government doing? Well, I'm happy to say that a few good things are happening. The effective action we need to solve climate change is in the hands of Congress. We have been working with members of Congress, and in September of 2015, 11 Republicans passed a resolution in the House to form a committee to investigate what should be done about climate change. Citizens Climate Lobby and the Friends Service Committee, among others, brought this about. Since then, you may have read that Representative Reed, Republican of New York, and Representative Jolly, Republican from Florida, have also signed on. And this month, a bipartisan climate solution caucus was created, and it will be composed of equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans. So they're talking together about this issue. Here's our proposal, carbon fee and dividend. Oil, gas, coal, fossil fuel companies, they will, at the extraction point, they will start with paying $10 a ton, and then every year it will rise by $10 until eventually they pay $100 a ton fee. And all the money goes to the U.S. Treasury Department. And then the Treasury will refund that 100% to households by using some of the existing ways that the government gives us money back as it is. So it might take away 0.8% to 1%. Then the fuel companies will raise prices and fossil fuel-based products will become more expensive. But we'll have the dividend in our pockets in order to help pay for these costs. Non-fossil fuel products will become cheaper. Fuel companies, let's see, when things get cheaper, people will be buying less of the more expensive things and more of the more inexpensive things. So now we'll have a video.
There are many things we can do to combat global warming. But the single most important thing we can do, the real solution, is to put a price on carbon. You and I pay to put our trash on the sidewalk, but right now, none of us pays to put carbon dioxide into the air. Nobody pays to trash our atmosphere. Why is that? Well, the big fossil fuel companies have been lobbying to keep it that way, saying that putting a price on carbon pollutants will hurt the economy. They said the same thing about acid rain back in the 1970s when our rain was so full of pollutants from smokestacks that raindrops started to corrode steel bridges. It even hurt our eyes. But the big fossil fuel companies said putting a price on pollutants that caused acid rain would destroy the economy. We did it anyway. And you know what? The economy did fine. Even energy companies flourished. And we all but eliminated acid rain. We should do the same with carbon dioxide, where the stakes are even higher because carbon in the atmosphere is literally destroying the planet. So how would we do it? We'd start with a low price on carbon, say $10 for every ton we put into the air. The price would then gradually rise over time, and this would give energy companies a real reason to save money by reducing carbon pollution. It would also encourage them to spend and invest more on non-carbon energies like solar, wind, and hydropower. Now, it is true that putting a price on carbon could make our electricity bills more expensive, at least in the short term. But there's an easy solution to that. All the money collected by the polluters would go into a big fund that would then be divided up and sent to every American. So even if your electricity bill were to go up $10 a month, you'd get back at least $10, if not more. So how do we make this happen? We have to vote into office politicians who will put a price on carbon and vote out of office politicians who won't. It is that simple. And if you want to tell your senators and congressmen that putting a price on carbon is important, it's easy to do so. All it will take is about 30 seconds. This map will show you who your elected representatives are. And it will allow you to send them an email telling them it's time to put a price on carbon. Think about it. You can take action right now to combat climate change.
Okay, so, I'll do that. Oops, there we go. So, economists and conservatives agree it's not a tax if the government doesn't keep the money. George Shultz, Secretary of State to Reagan, and tax those things we would like to have less of. Gregory Mankiw, Harvard professor and economic advisor to George Bush. It's kind of like the cigarette tax in that at one time 50% of Americans smoked. Today that number is in the teens. And when I ask people why they've quit or cut down, they say it's too expensive. So if we have a choice, we're going to use the least expensive energy. So conservatives like the policy because it's fast, cheap, simple, scalable, predictable, and international. It's preferable to EPA regulation and big government. If we do nothing and continue with business as usual, the cost of catastrophes will rise. Like Hurricane Sandy, which we still haven't totally cleaned up. But with action, we can level that off. In 10 years, clean energy becomes cheaper than carbon-based energy. The fossil fuel era has been wonderful. We've built cities, roads, expanded industry. But it is time to move past fossil fuels like we did with whale oil, typewriters, and video cassettes. There will be some pain, but it's called progress. I know so many senior citizens who have moved from a pencil to computers, iPads, and iPhones. We can do it. In September of 2014, the World Bank released a climate declaration signed by 1,000 global companies and 74 nations. China signed it, Shell Oil signed it, Dow Chemical signed it. The U.S. did not sign it. These companies are already preparing to pay a price on carbon. They built it into their economic prospectus. People say, what about China? Well, this fee and dividend has a border tariff adjustment on goods imported and exported to countries without an equivalent price on carbon. So in this way, people can't move their businesses over to a company or a country that doesn't charge a carbon fee. And they'll have to pay, if they don't have a carbon fee on their goods, they have to pay a tariff if they come in. In 2014, the Regional Economic Models, Inc. released a study of carbon fee and dividend on 160 industries and projected the impacts of a steadily rising carbon fee on jobs, health, CO2 emissions, and household income. The first thing they found out was that in 20 years, 2.8 million jobs would be added due to the economic stimulus of recycling the carbon fee back to households. The carbon fee and dividend also creates cleaner and higher paying jobs. Currently in the U.S., the green economy already supports more jobs than the fossil fuel economy. Even though the renewable energy economy counts for only 11% of our domestically produced energy. For every $1 million worth of oil and gas, only 0.8 jobs per million are created. With green energy, building retrofits for energy efficiency creates 7 jobs per million. Building the smart grid would create 4.3 jobs. Wind would create 4.6 jobs per million and solar 5.4. This proposal was shown also to rapidly reduce carbon dioxide in the air. In 10 years, CO2 will be reduced 31% in comparison to 1990 levels, and in 20 years, 50%. Household refunds start at $48 a month for a family of 4 and rise to $400 a month by 2035. This enables people to buy solar panels, make payments on an electric car, and buy other things. And the cars and the solar panels will become cheaper because they'll be selling them in volume. The REMI study also showed that carbon fee and dividend will save lives due to the decreased pollutants in the air. The study showed up to 225,000 lives saved by decreasing pollution over a 20-year period. To argue against carbon fee and dividend is to argue against increased jobs, increased GDP, lives, and clean air. No politician would want to make this argument. We know the solution. Citizens Climate Lobby was founded in 2007. It has doubled its membership every year since, with hardly any advertising or anything. Word of mouth. Our singular mission is to lobby Congress to pass the carbon fee and dividend. Video.
The climate is changing. Extreme weather is disrupting livelihoods and food supplies around the world. This is observed. This is documented. This is the scientific community's consensus. The climate is changing. Carbon emissions are driving that change. Emissions come from burning fossil fuels. So if we want to slow or even reverse the change, we must lower our fossil fuel use. By charging a fee on fossil fuels and returning that revenue to households as a dividend, we can do just that, starting a chain of positive effects. Fossil fuels become less desirable. Cleaner sources of energy become more competitive. The dividend creates millions of jobs. Carbon emissions go down, reduced air pollution saves tens of thousands of lives, and climate change is brought under control. We can make this happen, but enacting a carbon fee and dividend isn't in our hands, it's in theirs. How do we sway them? What can we do? We can use our voices to express political will and demand action. We must help our elected leaders work together. It's on us to tell them what we want as a group. Because when voices call out together, their impact multiplies. Government can respond to the will of the people, provided we tell the government what we want. And what we want is a livable world. This is what Citizens Climate Lobby works for. To empower citizens to connect with and influence their members of Congress. To spread the idea that each one of us can address climate change. Bring your voice to citizensclimatelobby.org.
Okay, so our methods, we focus on solutions. We instill hope. We educate constituents, and we develop strong, respectful relationships with elected officials. Over on the left or the right, you'll see your comfort zone and where the magic happens. When you join this organization, you rise above your usual capacities and do things you never thought you'd be doing. So we build political will by enlisting influencers in agriculture, military, business, finance, faith leaders to sign a carbon fee endorsement letter. We have, currently, we have a liaison for every representative and senator in the United States. And we meet with them regularly. And we also meet with them in DC in June at our national convention. We had a group over at the Paris COP21. Now, we work with the print and TV. We were on radio today with Evan Dawson. Social media, editorial boards, and we do outreach presentations, education, and tabling. So if you know of groups that would like to have a presentation, take my card on the table out there and you can get a hold of us. What legacy do you want to leave your children and grandchildren? I urge you to check our website, to begin to talk with others about your concerns and their concerns about our climate, to write to your congressmen and women and let them know what you want them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Our second presenter will talk about the bill in the New York State Assembly and the New York State Senate. Susan.
How are you all this evening? Great. Carol, thanks so much for that overview and for the fabulous idea that CCL has to offer. If you want to think about just in New York State, however, there are a couple different options. And the first thing you might want to know is where are the greenhouse gas emissions coming from for our state? Any idea what the biggest producer of greenhouse gases is?
Cars?
It is, yeah, transportation. That's according to the Energy Information Administration. In 2013, the transportation sector produced 66 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. That's just for our state. Okay, the next biggest, any thoughts?
Home heating.
Heating, right. So home and commercial together was 54 million metric tons, with homes slightly edging out the commercial sector. And then lastly is electricity, which is kind of interesting, because what we hear the most about and what the Clean Power Plan and things like that talk about is electricity. And in New York State, we actually have one of the cleanest electric grids, though it still produced 30 million metric tons of carbon emissions last year. So it's not that it's perfect, and it does need some work, but if you had to rank which to solve first, you might want to pick transportation. So this bill for 100% clean energy by 2030 is not saying 100% clean electricity. It's saying 100% of our energy needs for everything should be met by renewables by 2030. It's really aggressive, and that's where the science says we need to be. And that, I think, is vitally important. There's lots of groups and people out there who say, well, we have to kind of focus on what's practical, and yet you can't really negotiate with the natural world. So maybe the politicians need to follow the science for a change. Some analysis has been done. This plan was proposed as a result of some work done by Stanford University Professor Jacobson, and he works with some other folks down from Cornell. And their group is called the Solutions Project, so that's kind of was the genesis for this bill. Some key parts to it, as I said, 100% clean energy by 2030. They want to phase out nuclear. The third piece would be to stop investments in fossil fuels. That means prevent the state from developing the distribution, processing, storage, or extraction of fossil fuels within our state. No new permits and phasing things out. Fourth, it should have clear benchmarks. If we want to get somewhere by 2030, when we should know what we're going to get done. And the request is for that to be every 5 years. How much CO2 are we going to reduce? What are the steps that we need to take to get there? Then the fifth one is to increase energy conservation and efficiency. We've got a lot of old houses. They've got to be updated. They've got to have a lot more insulation to reduce their energy demand, to make them tight enough so that we can switch to things like geothermal, and that would work effectively to keep those buildings warm. Okay, so we're going to need a lot of investment in that section. So those are kind of the key components to the bill. Anything else? I guess we'll take questions later.
My name's
Melissa Carlson, and since Sue started out with questions, I'll say, why should we divest? Why should you divest? What's divestment about? Any answers? Okay.
It drives up money for their, it dries up money for their research.
Gets money out of where some people want it. Anything else?
Make the bad guys look bad.
We have to wean the economy off of fossil fuels because fossil fuels are driving the economy.
I heard makes them look bad. There's lots of divestment campaigns going on, and this bill is known as the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act, related to the pension fund, officially known as the Common Retirement Fund. I'm going to add a disclaimer, I'm not an investment professional, so I don't know much more than what I'm going to tell you tonight. This fund serves to pay pensions of the state employees and also as a source of investment for small businesses in New York. So it benefits New York with investments and payouts to all of us getting pensions. The total fund is worth $184 billion. It's the third largest pension fund out of 50 states, and it's in the top 100 of all managed funds in the U.S. This matters when we mention influence. I'll tell you some of the justifications published with this bill and some other information I've gathered about divestment. But I'm not going to say whether to vote for or against it. Currently, the law allows the comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, to invest in any investments and securities authorized by law. The fund managers work like any investment firm, investing to make a return for the shareholders. That's the fiduciary responsibility. The part of the fund invested in fossil fuel is relatively small. I ended up about $5 billion from the rough graph they have, and I saw another blogger said it was $12 billion, or about 7% of the whole fund. So this isn't a majority of the fund by any means, but it's still a lot of money. And that's, on their graph said it was mining, drilling, and fossil fuel production, so it's not any one sector of fossil fuel industry. In 2014, when DiNapoli was running for office, he said that climate change posed significant potential risks to the fund's investments. So those risks had to be factored into investment practices. In 2015, he recommended shareholder advocacy to get corporations to change. His idea was that as long as we, or New York State, own stock in a company, we can ask that company to change. But once we divest, then we have no say. Earlier this month, he argued again against divesting from fossil fuels because cutting ties with companies that use harmful energy sources would have little positive effect. It won't put those companies out of business. For comparison, ExxonMobil is worth over $400 billion. It wouldn't be bothered by New York's few dollars walking out